Things have not been going good for Ubisoft lately with their recent game releases, losing millions of dollars for the studio and investors calling for the company to go private in order to try to salvage some of their losses. And this can ultimately stem from gamers choosing to pass up on Ubisoft content because, well, the company has openly embraced identity politics either in the games that they're pushing or in their hiring practices, which have resulted in subpar work that they've been releasing to the public. The pushback has gotten so great that even gamers are starting to pass up on titles that Ubisoft releases that were initially better received upon their launch. This article right here from Game Rant is talking about Assassin's Creed Mirage because it was just launched on Steam, and it's looking like gamers are starting to pass up on this one. Assassin's Creed Mirage has gotten off to a rough start on Steam after launching to a much lower peak player count than recent entries in the series. Although Assassin's Creed Mirage has been available on other PC storefronts since October 2023, it was recently released on Steam after a year of waiting. SteamDB player count charts don't paint a pretty picture for the early days of Assassin's Creed Mirage's Steam release. On the first Saturday of its release, when it would be expected to retain the most players, the game peaked at 6,381 players at the time of writing. The article goes on to mention some of the player counts for the releases of other recent Assassin's Creed games. Origins peaked at 41,551 players, Odyssey 62,069 players, Valhalla 15,679 players, and it says here that's a considerable decrease for Assassin's Creed Mirage. In the interest of fairness, Valhalla is the only game of the RPG trio that didn't have a day one Steam release, which explains its own lower numbers. And that's something I think is fair to point out when it comes to this, though, is a lot of those other games actually had the same day and date release on physical copies as well as on Steam. This one, since it's been out a little while, maybe people have already played it who want to play it. So that's why they're choosing to pass this one up, because there's no reason to play it on Steam. If you're already a fan of Assassin's Creed, you would have gotten it on some other platform. You wouldn't necessarily be getting it on Steam. But still, I think it is fair to point out, though, if this did do really well on Steam, because a lot of people have been talking about how Ubisoft has been losing their audience recently. So if this game actually did do well upon its Steam release, then people would probably be touting this as like, oh, you see, Ubisoft isn't losing their touch with the audience because people are still playing their games. But since this is doing pretty bad, I think it is still fair to say, like, does this mean that Ubisoft is losing their touch with their audience? And if that's the case, then what are the ramifications for their upcoming game, Assassin's Creed Shadows? I'll get more on that in a little bit, but first let's continue with this article from Game Rant. There's no doubt that the numbers are skewed by the delayed Steam release, but that won't be a problem for Ubisoft games going forward. Assassin's Creed Shadows will launch day one on Steam, as will most games from the publisher going forward. That was also one of the problems when it came to Valhalla 2 and why the player count on that was so low on Steam release, because that was also released after the initial launch. So the question when it comes to Assassin's Creed Shadows is, where will it measure up when it comes to some of these other releases? Because that's something I kind of want to know about, and it'll be an indicator of whether the game is well received or not. The game was delayed multiple times, and right now, though, even though we don't necessarily know what the Steam numbers are going to be for its digital release, the physical copies, at least the pre-orders for that, are not looking too good. I've talked about this in the past, but I'll just kind of reiterate that for the sake of this video, just to kind of illustrate what I'm trying to talk about here, where it was previously rumored that around out of 800 or 900 storefronts in the country, only around 800 copies of Assassin's Creed Shadows were pre-ordered for that, which is pretty abysmal. This is coming from Stuttering Craig over on the Side Scrollers podcast. He says this is from his inside sources who manages 900 big box stores around the country that sell video games, and that's what he was saying from that. You can take it with a pinch of salt because it is rumors from an anonymous source like this, but at the same time, he did do some projections like this for other recent games like Star Wars Outlaws, for instance, and what he was saying was actually pretty close to accurate, because we did see that was had abysmal sales upon its initial launch. That's why after it launched, Ubisoft stock just tanked, because the investors were not happy with the sales figures that they were getting for Star Wars Outlaws, especially considering how much money that the company actually spent on it. And you can also look at some other metrics here too. It talks about it in this article from That Park Place. On the PlayStation Store, the game, the base game for Star Wars Outlaw is currently listed in the 6th position. Okay, so this is talking about Star Wars Outlaw, how that did. Assassin's Creed Shadows Ultimate Edition, which costs $129.99, sits in 22nd position on the list. The base game sits in 31st position on the second page. The Gold Edition of Assassin's Creed Shadows sits in the 42nd position. So just how anticipated they are. So not doing too good. They're not even in the top 10 on there as far as anticipated games that are supposed to be released. And a lot of people are saying this is ultimately why Ubisoft decided to delay the release of Assassin's Creed Shadows. This article came out before it was announced that they're going to be delaying that, because you would think it just makes common sense right there, where if a company is doing well and they're getting a lot of pre-orders for Assassin's Creed Shadows, then why would they delay it? Because whatever they're doing is working for them. So why would you risk upsetting your audience if you're doing something that they're actually receptive to? So it looks like they weren't really happy with the early pre-order numbers for it. So that's why they delayed it. They're saying they're just going to try to polish things up and fix some things to get, okay, fine. I mean, I can grant the premise that that's what they're trying to do. Some people are speculating they're going to remove Yasuke entirely. And I don't necessarily believe that they're going to do that. They probably could do that in the time frame, or they might do some things like that, but I don't think that's actually going to happen. I think they are trying to fix some of the mistakes that they have in it, because at the very least, they didn't like the pushback they were getting for Star Wars Outlaws by releasing basically a broken game with a lot of bugs and other things like that with it. So they're going to give themselves more time in order to fix that up. So fan backlash was a good thing in this regard, as opposed to them just releasing a broken game and then expecting people just to accept it and then they'll fix it later if they bother to get around with it. But still, I think they wouldn't be doing that if the pre-order numbers for it were good. So as of right now, it's looking like the early reaction to Assassin's Creed Shadows is pretty abysmal, and it could be an indicator that people aren't happy with Ubisoft. The poor sales or the poor player count of Assassin's Creed Mirage could also be reflected of that, or this could just be a separate thing entirely. It makes no difference whatsoever how well Assassin's Creed Mirage does versus how Assassin's Creed Shadows will do. But like I was saying before, if this game did really well, I think people would be talking about how it's a good indicator that Assassin's Creed Shadows will probably do well too, because it shows that people are happy and satisfied with the job Ubisoft is doing. So in that same regard, I think it is fair to say, since this is doing poor, it could be a potential indicator that Assassin's Creed Shadows will also do poor when it's released on Steam. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share this video out there, because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.